War and Peace is an 1869 novel by the Russian writer Leo Tolstoy, although Tolstoy himself was adamant that it's not a novel at all, probably because it didn't conform to 19th century criteria. Nowadays, when we're happy for novels to contain all sorts of disparate material, it seems pointless trying to find another word for it. It's an historical, epic story in prose with intermittent philosophical passages. In any case, many people consider it the greatest novel ever written, and some of its most vocal champions have been major novelists in their own right. Gustave Flaubert said it had him shrieking with delight, while Thomas Mann considered it literature's greatest ever war novel, and Ernest Hemingway said it taught him how to write effectively about war. It's nearly 600,000 words long, and it took Tolstoy 6 years to write, going through several revisions and appearing in serial form in a magazine called The Russian Herald from 1865 onwards. Originally called The Year 1805, Tolstoy only settled on its present title when it was finally published in book form. It's set just before and then during Napoleon's Russian campaign of 1812. It focuses on 5 families and their attempts to run estates, secure favourable marriages, climb social ladders, and make sense of life, all while they're increasingly drawn into the war. There are at least 20 major characters, although some, of course, are more central than others. Probably the most important is a young man called Pierre Betzikov, the illegitimate son of a rather disreputable count who inherits a fortune on his father's death, but who breaks a disastrous marriage to a woman who has no real affection for him. Pierre strives for moral integrity and an understanding of the deeper problems of life. He's probably based on the author. Tolstoy researched the novel's background in depth, although he could apparently find few personal accounts by ordinary Russian citizens of everyday life from the period. His descriptions of major battles, of which the novel contains 10 in all, were so meticulous that the official newspaper of Russia's military veterans at the time praised their historical and artistic truthfulness. What makes War and Peace great at its scope, it provides an extensive picture of an entire society from a collection of different angles at one critical point in its history, and it does that whilst keeping the reader fully engaged in the affairs and fortunes of its characters. It's common to hear people say that reading War and Peace is a little like being in the room with its characters, their mannerisms, their different modes of speech, the minute attention to the detail of their motives all work together to draw the reader in. You may not actually know these individuals, but you almost certainly know people very like them, even today, over 150 years after the novel was written, and over 200 since the events it depicts. Of course, there are weaknesses. For most readers, the philosophical passages are hard work. Tolstoy's aim was to provide, or at least make space for, a theory of history that recognized the opposing contributions of free will and causal necessity to major events. His reflections, partly based on Schopenhauer's 1818 The World as Will and Idea, have had no impact on philosophy more generally. There's a lot of French in War and Peace. Nearly all aristocratic Russians spoke French in those days, to the extent that some even spoke it as a first language and didn't know much Russian at all. If you can't read French, it's worth checking that there's a translation in the text. Finally, whether War and Peace really is the world's greatest novel is difficult to gauge nowadays because there are so many different things we expect from a novel. What can be said is that if you think some other novel deserves that honour and you haven't yet read War and Peace, well, you're simply not qualified to judge.